Hello, my name is Kyle DiMaggio, and this is a presentation on Dorado Incorporated and the Finn Lofts. To start, the topics of discussion that will be covered in this presentation are the discourse, the who, what, where, and why, connection, with whom, the people, people to environment, and environmental impact on people, and then program, the site, the program itself, and then light within the program. So to start with the discourse, a little bit of history on El Dorado. They're a medium-sized architecture firm that started in Wichita, Kansas as a maker space firm. They were all makers and they did a lot of live work and making, and then gradually developed into an architecture firm. However, they still carry forward a lot of what they learned and a lot of what they did while making into their architectural work. So looking ahead still, the Finn Lofts is also located in Wichita, Kansas, in what is known as the Commerce Art District. And that's located within an older industrial area of Wichita, which has now been converted into heavy commercial with outlying industrial and residential. It has a lot of transportation around it, being vehicular. There's a railway behind it. It has main streets and plenty of secondary streets that lead to it, also river and parks surrounding it. And a little bit of history on the Finn Lofts himself. It was an old industrial factory. It was an old broom factory that was built in the early 20s. Changed hands a few times until it came into the ownership of a John Finn, who also owned a few other buildings in the area. And then a few years later, it closed down and has since been repurchased, has been redeveloped, and is now open for business as a commercial/residential space. The lofts themselves, as I stated, are multi-use. They have commercial and live-make spaces on the first floor, and then residential units on the second and third stories of them. Much of what has been done with the Finn Lofts themselves, and much of what El Dorado does, can also be likened to stuff that is going on locally in Detroit, like at the Russell Industrial Center, which is also an old industrial building that has been repurposed into a commercial and residential space. Much like the Finn Lofts, the Russell Industrial Center is also located in an area that shares heavy industrial, residential, and commercial tendencies around it, as well as has many forms of transportation surrounding it via vehicular and rail. So moving forward into connections. Like many of their projects, the Finn Lofts also shares plenty of connections to it, and that these connections also help to bolster the project, bolster the site, and help give it a little extra character to it. So to start, people to people is something that happens with all of these high capacity residential sites, in that you're always seeing other people. Especially this is true in cities where you always see people and you always interact with people. So giving them a building that helps, again, to interact a little bit more with people and with themselves. So having a mixed use building helps to bolster these relations and connections. People to their environment deals with their people and their immediate surroundings, be it the loss or the surrounding city, but also the greater city as a whole, and how these people interact with it, and then the environment will interact with them. So being within the Commerce Art District, up and coming and a very popular art district that has a lot of new and a lot of revitalized buildings, it's important to get people into the area, because people do and are starting to move back into cities, as we see with people to cities. Up to a third of the population is estimated within the next 10 to 15 years are to move back to the cities. So it's important to take many of these buildings, many of these sites that are maybe a little worn down or not being used currently, and revitalize them. Helps to bring an additional character to the city, helps to improve the environment, helps to improve people's interest in it, and helps to overall to improve the quality of life in the city, while also giving these people places to go without having to constantly tear down and rebuild and use open green space for the purpose of building new residencies. As we've seen so often, many of these cities fall into the urban sprawl problem, where there's just houses upon houses, row upon row, tightly packed residential units put together. But with an increasing population moving back towards the cities, it's important to go vertical and to start reusing and revitalizing spaces that are already there. Moving forward again to the program, we come across the site. And like stated earlier, the site, it's in Lofts are located within a great area of Wichita, being surrounded by many means of transportation and many ways of access to get to the site itself. It's an old industrial area that has been repurposed into commercial and rezoned in commercial, which allows the character of what was there, the old industrial, to come forth into a new life with new uses. Like I said, also the site is also mixed use, being commercial and residential, which then leads into the program itself. And the program, like a lot of other programs that El Dorado has worked on, it is mixed use and is also revitalized. So people to people connections and people to their environment connections are very important and are a very big driving factor within the Lofts themselves and within many other projects. Because of the fact that these are revitalized buildings, there's a little bit of extra care that needs to be taken to them in order to allow them to accommodate a new clientele, allow them to accommodate new residents, as we see here with light. A third and also very important aspect that El Dorado takes into a lot of their projects, and many others do as well, is light. Light being that it is very important, as we all know now, that everybody has some kind of direct contact with sunlight or some kind of contact with light in general that is not necessarily electrical, because it has very many health effects that are positive to us, including mental and physical health benefits. So what El Dorado has done with this project and with a few others is what they call borrowing horizontal and vertical light. So in addition to just opening up holes in the walls for windows, they also include these light shafts that allow diffused light to penetrate into these spaces. While not offering a direct light, it also helps to give a little bit more ambient light to the spaces, a little bit more diffused light, which will cut down on stuff like electricity for lighting, while also improving the quality of life within these spaces. So once again, the three main topics for this whole project were discourse, connection, and program. El Dorado takes these and many others into consideration with many of their works, as well as you can see and have seen with the Lofts. Perhaps the three biggest areas that they take into consideration are, as we've stated here, the site, people to the city, the program, people to people, and people with their environment, the immediate building. What has that building been in the past? What can it be in the future? And also light. How can we make these buildings inhabitable and comfortable for people to inhabit? Thank you. My name is Kyle DiMaggio, and this has been a presentation on El Dorado and the Lofts.